Welcome to Lesson 2 of Week 8. Today we explore the Prudent Person Test, which is the fundamental standard for evaluating federal grant expenditures. This deceptively simple concept provides powerful guidance for making defensible spending decisions. The Prudent Person Standard asks a straightforward question: would a reasonable person spend their own money this way? When you can answer yes convincingly, you are likely making a compliant spending decision. When you hesitate or must construct elaborate justifications, reconsider the expenditure. This lesson will help you internalize the prudent person mindset so that good spending decisions become instinctive rather than requiring constant reference to regulations. We will explore what reasonableness means in practice, how to apply the standard across different types of purchases, and how to document your reasoning in ways that satisfy auditors. Remember that the regulatory framework discussed was accurate as of November 2025. Always verify current requirements at ecfr.gov. By the end of this lesson, you will understand how to apply the Prudent Person Test to any purchasing decision, helping you spend grant funds responsibly while avoiding compliance problems that could jeopardize your organization's standing with funders. The Prudent Person Standard is rooted in a simple but powerful question: would a reasonable person pay this amount for these goods or services? This question cuts through complexity and provides intuitive guidance for countless spending decisions. The context for this evaluation matters. The standard asks what someone would pay with their own money in similar circumstances, not what a wealthy person might pay, not what a careless person might pay, but what a reasonable, thoughtful person would pay when spending their own funds. This framing encourages careful consideration rather than casual expenditure. 2 CFR 200.404 establishes the regulatory basis for reasonableness requirements. The regulation states that a cost is reasonable if, in its nature and amount, it does not exceed that which would be incurred by a prudent person under the circumstances prevailing at the time the decision was made to incur the cost. Note the temporal element. Reasonableness is evaluated based on circumstances at the time of decision, not with hindsight. This standard applies universally to all costs charged to federal awards. From multi-million-dollar equipment purchases to $10 office supplies, every expenditure should pass the Prudent Person Test. No purchase is too small to deserve thoughtful consideration, and no purchase is too large to escape scrutiny. Reasonableness encompasses several interconnected elements that together determine whether an expenditure is justified. Understanding each element helps you evaluate costs comprehensively. Necessity asks whether this expense is truly needed for the project. A prudent person does not spend money on things they do not need. Before making any purchase, consider whether it is essential for accomplishing project objectives. Nice-to-have items that are not actually necessary fail the reasonableness test regardless of price. Amount evaluates whether the price is appropriate for what is being purchased. Even for necessary items, a prudent person seeks fair prices. Paying significantly more than market rate suggests either poor shopping or inappropriate use of funds. The amount should be justified by the value received. Timing considers whether the expense is incurred at an appropriate point in the project. Purchasing supplies months before they will be used ties up funds unnecessarily. Rushing purchases at year-end to spend remaining budget may lead to poor decisions. A prudent person times purchases to match actual needs. Method examines whether an appropriate process was used to make the purchase. Did you seek competitive quotes when appropriate? Did you follow your organization's procurement policies? Did you document your decision-making? The process by which you arrive at a purchase affects its reasonableness even when the final price seems fair. Let us examine what the regulation actually says about reasonableness. 2 CFR 200.404 states that a cost is reasonable if, in its nature and amount, it does not exceed that which would be incurred by a prudent person under the circumstances prevailing at the time the decision was made to incur the cost. The regulation identifies several factors to consider when evaluating reasonableness. These include whether the cost is of a type generally recognized as ordinary and necessary for operation of the organization or performance of the award. They include the restraints or requirements imposed by factors such as sound business practices, arm's length bargaining, federal and state laws and regulations, and terms and conditions of the award. Consideration of market prices is explicit in the regulation. A cost should reflect market prices for comparable goods or services in the geographic area. If you pay significantly more than prevailing market rates, you should be prepared to explain why. Similarly, prices significantly below market might raise questions about quality or legitimacy of the transaction. As always, verify the current regulatory text at ecfr.gov. The specific language and any amendments since November 2025 should be confirmed before making compliance decisions based on regulatory interpretation. Personnel costs often represent the largest portion of grant budgets, making reasonable determination especially important. The Prudent Person Standard applies to both salary rates and staffing decisions. Salary rates must be comparable to similar positions in your geographic area. If you propose paying a project coordinator significantly more than coordinators earn at peer organizations locally, auditors may question the reasonableness. Use salary surveys, position postings, and comparable positions at your organization to benchmark proposed rates. Effort levels should match actual work requirements. Proposing full-time effort for a position that clearly requires only part-time work suggests either padding the budget or misunderstanding the project scope. Conversely, underestimating effort creates problems when staff cannot complete necessary work within budgeted time. Each position must serve a clear project purpose. Can you explain why this position is necessary and what the person will do? If the connection to project activities is unclear, the position may not be reasonable regardless of salary level. Every position should have identifiable responsibilities tied to project objectives. Some awards cap salary charges, particularly NIH grants with the current NIH salary cap. Check your specific award terms for any compensation limits. Proposing salaries above applicable caps suggests unfamiliarity with funder requirements and will require budget revisions. Travel is an area where prudent person considerations frequently arise. Auditors and reviewers often scrutinize travel expenditures closely because abuse potential is high and waste is visible. Every trip must serve a legitimate project purpose. Attending a conference should connect to project objectives, such as disseminating findings, learning relevant skills, or meeting collaborators. Site visits should be necessary for project implementation. Travel that is convenient but not clearly necessary fails the prudent person test. Class of service defaults to coach for air travel. A prudent person spending their own money would typically choose the most economical option that meets their needs. First class or business class travel requires compelling justification, such as documented medical necessity or unavailability of coach seats on the only viable flight. Simply preferring more comfort does not justify premium travel. GSA per diem rates provide safe harbor for lodging and meal expenses on federal grants. Staying within these rates demonstrates reasonableness. If local rates exceed GSA allowances and you need to exceed them, document why and seek any required approvals. Exceeding GSA rates without justification invites questions. The frequency of travel should be justified by project needs. Proposing monthly trips when quarterly trips would suffice wastes funds. Consider whether objectives could be accomplished through virtual meetings at lower cost. Equipment and supply purchases should reflect prudent decisions about specifications, quantities, vendors, and timing. Each element affects the reasonableness of your expenditure. Specifications should match project needs without unnecessary features. If you need a laptop for word processing and email, purchasing a high-end gaming laptop with features you will never use fails the prudent person test. Similarly, purchasing laboratory equipment with capabilities far beyond your experimental requirements wastes funds. Buy what you need, not what might be nice to have. Quantity decisions matter. Purchasing office supplies for a 5-year project when your grant is 3 years, or buying enough consumables for experiments you may never conduct, ties up funds unproductively. Base quantities on realistic estimates of actual usage during the grant period. Vendor selection should demonstrate reasonable choice. While you need not always select the lowest bidder, you should be able to explain your selection criteria. Factors like reliability, service, and delivery time can justify choosing other than the lowest price, but these justifications should be documented. Timing of purchases affects reasonableness. End-of-year spending sprees to exhaust remaining budget often produce poor purchasing decisions. Equipment sitting unused for extended periods suggests premature purchasing. A prudent person buys when the need arises, not according to budget cycles. Consultant costs receive particular scrutiny because of potential for abuse and the often substantial amounts involved. Applying prudent person standards carefully to consultant arrangements protects your project and organization. Consultant rates must be reasonable for the expertise provided. Rates should reflect what the consultant typically charges others and what similar consultants charge in the market. A consultant charging $300 per hour for work typically billed at $150 raises immediate questions. Document how you determined the rate was reasonable. Consider necessity carefully. If existing staff could perform the work, engaging a consultant wastes funds. Consultants are appropriate for specialized expertise not available internally, for temporary capacity needs, or for independent perspectives. If the primary reason for using a consultant is convenience rather than capability, the arrangement may not be reasonable. Your selection process matters. How did you identify this consultant? Did you consider alternatives? Engaging a friend without considering other qualified candidates suggests favoritism rather than prudent selection. Document your selection process, including any competition or sole source justification. Scope definition protects both parties and demonstrates thoughtfulness. What will the consultant deliver? By when? How will you know if the work is satisfactory? Clear expectations documented before work begins indicate prudent contracting practices. Certain patterns raise red flags about reasonableness and may trigger closer examination by auditors or reviewers. Being aware of these warning signs helps you avoid problems. Luxury items signal potential reasonableness problems. Purchasing premium products when standard versions would fully meet project needs suggests prioritizing comfort or status over responsible stewardship. The latest iPhone when a basic smartphone suffices, first-class flights when coach is available, luxury hotel accommodations when modest options exist nearby, these choices fail the prudent person test. Unusual vendor selection warrants scrutiny. Choosing vendors with personal relationships over equally or better qualified alternatives suggests favoritism. Consistently using the same vendor without considering competitors may indicate either relationship-based decisions or failure to seek best value. Document why you selected particular vendors. Rush decisions often produce poor outcomes. Purchases made quickly without proper consideration of alternatives, specifications, or pricing suggest either poor planning or deliberate evasion of thoughtful review. Build time for proper evaluation into your procurement processes. A pattern of maximum spending raises questions. If your budgets consistently show expenditures exactly at or near limits across all categories, auditors may wonder whether spending was driven by budget availability rather than actual need. Underspending demonstrates fiscal responsibility. Spending every available dollar regardless of need does not. Good documentation is your defense against questions about reasonableness. Building documentation habits protects you during audits and demonstrates responsible stewardship. Contemporaneous records capture rationale at the time of decision when information is fresh and accurate. Do not wait until an auditor asks why you made a purchase to reconstruct your reasoning. Document briefly but clearly why each significant purchase was necessary and why the price was appropriate. A few sentences recorded promptly are worth more than elaborate explanations created months later. Comparison evidence shows that you considered alternatives. Even when not formally required to obtain competitive quotes, document the options you considered and why you selected the chosen vendor or product. This demonstrates thoughtful decision-making rather than impulse purchasing. Market research provides evidence of fair pricing. Include in your documentation any price comparisons, quotes from multiple vendors, or reference to published price lists. When your purchase price aligns with market rates, this evidence strongly supports reasonableness. Business purpose documentation links expenditures to project activities. Why did you need this item? What project activity does it support? A clear connection between purchases and project objectives demonstrates that spending was driven by project needs rather than personal preferences or organizational convenience. Understanding common mistakes helps you avoid them. These errors frequently cause problems even for experienced grant managers. Assuming allowable equals reasonable is a fundamental error. Just because a type of cost is permitted does not mean any amount is acceptable. Office supplies are allowable, but spending $10,000 on paper clips would not be reasonable. Equipment is allowable, but paying 3 times market rate is not reasonable. Reasonableness is a separate test from allowability. Ignoring market rates invites problems. When you pay significantly more than comparable organizations pay for similar goods or services, auditors will ask why. If you have good reasons, document them. If you do not have good reasons, you probably made a poor decision. Market awareness should inform all purchasing decisions. Choosing convenience over economy fails the prudent person test. A prudent person spending their own money would not typically choose the expensive, easy option over the economical option requiring modest additional effort. Booking the hotel closest to the conference venue rather than a reasonably priced hotel nearby, using overnight shipping when standard shipping would suffice, these convenience choices waste funds. Poor timing suggests poor planning or improper motivation. Purchasing supplies far in advance of need ties up funds and risks waste. Rushing purchases at year-end to spend remaining budget often produces poor decisions. Plan purchases to align with actual project needs throughout the performance period. Reasonableness is not just an individual responsibility but an organizational one. Institutions should build systems supporting prudent spending decisions. Organizational policies provide frameworks for consistent decision-making. Your institution should have procurement policies specifying when competitive quotes are required, travel policies establishing reimbursement limits, and purchasing procedures ensuring appropriate review. These policies operationalize prudent person principles for your specific context. Delegation of authority clarifies who can approve what level of expenditure. Small purchases might require only supervisor approval. Large purchases might need review by finance leadership or procurement offices. Major equipment might require institutional sign-off. Clear authority lines ensure appropriate oversight without creating bureaucratic bottlenecks. Documentation practices should anticipate audit questions. If your organization waits until audit to assemble documentation, you will scramble and likely fail to produce adequate evidence. Build documentation requirements into your regular processes so that supporting information accumulates naturally during normal operations. Training responsibility rests with the organization. Staff making purchases need to understand reasonableness expectations. Principal investigators, administrative assistants, and others with purchasing authority should receive training appropriate to their role. You cannot blame individual staff for poor decisions if the organization never trained them on expectations. Sometimes circumstances genuinely require incurring costs higher than you would normally consider reasonable. Understanding when this is acceptable and how to document it protects you when legitimate needs arise. Urgency can justify expedited shipping or premium prices. If equipment failure threatens project timelines and only overnight delivery can obtain replacement parts in time, that premium shipping cost may be reasonable in context. The key is that the urgency is real and project-related, not manufactured by poor planning or personal convenience. Specialized needs may limit vendor options and increase costs. If your project requires a specific piece of equipment available from only one manufacturer, you cannot obtain competitive quotes. If specialized expertise is available from limited consultants, you may pay premium rates. Document why your needs are specialized and why alternatives would not suffice. Geographic factors affect costs. Per diem rates vary by location because prices vary. Work conducted in remote areas may face higher transportation and supply costs. International work may involve currency fluctuations and logistical premiums. These factors can justify costs that would seem unreasonable in other contexts. When circumstances require higher costs, documentation becomes especially important. Explain the circumstances that necessitated higher expenditure. Describe why lower-cost alternatives were not feasible. Create a contemporaneous record that will make sense to an auditor who was not present when the decision was made. Beyond specific rules, cultivating a prudent person mindset makes good decisions instinctive. This mindset should guide your thinking whenever you spend grant funds. Embrace stewardship as a core responsibility. You are a custodian of public or philanthropic funds entrusted to accomplish specific purposes. These are not your personal resources to spend as you prefer. This perspective naturally leads to careful, considered decisions that prioritize mission over convenience. Maintain accountability readiness. Be prepared to explain any expenditure if asked. If you would be uncomfortable describing a purchase to your program officer, your board, or a reporter, reconsider whether it is appropriate. The discomfort you feel often signals that the expenditure fails the prudent person test. Apply consistency in your standards. The same standards you would want others to apply to their spending should govern your decisions. Would you be troubled if a colleague made this purchase? Would you question this expenditure if reviewing someone else's budget? Treating your own decisions with the same scrutiny you would apply to others promotes fairness and reasonableness. Ensure transparency in decision-making. Your processes and rationales should withstand scrutiny. If you feel the need to hide how a decision was made, that decision is probably problematic. Open, documented decision-making demonstrates integrity and builds trust. Let us summarize the key points from this lesson on the Prudent Person test. The Prudent Person Standard is the fundamental benchmark for evaluating federal grant expenditures. This simple but powerful concept asks whether a reasonable person would spend their own money this way in similar circumstances. When you can confidently answer yes, you are likely making a defensible spending decision. The core question should guide all your purchasing decisions. Would a reasonable person spend their own money this way? Consider necessity, amount, timing, and method. Apply these considerations consistently across personnel, travel, equipment, supplies, and consultant expenditures. The standard does not require the cheapest option always, but it does require thoughtful justification for choices made. Documentation protects you during audits. Record your rationale contemporaneously when decisions are made. Show alternatives considered, market research conducted, and business purposes served. Good documentation transforms subjective judgments into defensible decisions with objective support. In our next lesson, we examine allowable and allocable costs in detail. We will explore specific categories of costs that are always unallowable, understand how to determine whether a cost benefits your specific project, and learn how these tests interact with the reasonableness standard we discussed today. Practice exercise. Review a recent purchase you made on a grant. Could you explain to an auditor why it was necessary, why the price was appropriate, and how it served project objectives?